U.S. policy towards the region has not changed very much yet. It's changed in certain ways, and some of them are important, some are not. But it hasn't changed anything close to what's needed. But that's our job. We're in a new period now, a new period shaped by a global economic crisis, and an economic crisis here so that when we talk about what does it mean that our government, with our tax money, is giving $3 billion a year in military aid to the 23rd wealthiest country in the world, who's then using that military aid to commit war crimes, I think that resonates in a whole different way than it might have 1 year ago, when people didn't realize that, yes, they were paying the price for the war in Iraq because George Bush was paying for it on a credit card that wasn't going to come due for another generation. Now people are feeling it in their pocketbook. So when President Obama said in one of his first acts that he would implement the $30 billion commitment that President Bush made to provide $30 billion in military aid to Israel, that has a different resonance now. And our job is to grab that understanding and make it impossible for the politicians to do the wrong thing, because it's going to be more expensive politically for them to do the wrong thing than to do the right thing. That's what's different now. It's easier to get people to recognize the price that they are paying. Did President Obama back off on the settlements? Actually, I don't think so, because I don't think he was ever really pressuring to begin with. He was requesting. Requests are not pressure. It's not surprising that at the height of those requests, even then, Prime Minister Netanyahu and Israeli public opinion was saying, we don't feel any pressure from President Obama. They didn't feel it yet. It's our job to make it necessary for them to put that pressure on, because it will become politically impossible to get away with providing $30 billion of our hard-earned tax money over the next 10 years to support illegal weapons for Israel. So I think we have to come back to this notion that what is required is for us to determine, not to start or end with what President Obama is willing to do. There are really three President Obamas. There is President Obama the man, there is President Obama the candidate, and there's President Obama the president. And they frankly don't have a lot of common ground between them. They are three very different people. We could spend a lot of time examining that and figuring it out. I don't think that's such a good use of our time. I think our time is better spent changing the discourse even more than it has already changed. Look how the discourse has changed in the last 4 or 5 years. The U.S. campaign to end Israeli occupation that David spoke of earlier, that many of you have been in workshops with today, even before the Palestinian call for BDS emerged from what is now the unified leadership of the Palestinians. It's called civil society. 170 Palestinian organizations signed that call. It wasn't just about Fatah versus Hamas. It wasn't about the PLO versus the PA. It was about Palestinian civil society issuing a unified call with a strategy for the world to participate in, very much like what the ANC did in South Africa, which took decades to work, but ultimately it's what set the stage for the miracle that we heard about this morning from Charles, the miracle in South Africa. We talked to our enemies. Well, what made the enemies willing to talk to us? By the time they did it, they had no choice. They had no choice. Why? Because there had been a global mobilization, which didn't come out of nowhere. We like to think sometimes it was so easy for the South Africans. Everybody was against apartheid South Africa. Wrong, wrong, wrong. The U.S. took decades, didn't come out against apartheid until almost 1980. And by that time it was 30 years into the campaign of the ANC, the anti-apartheid movement. So let's have no illusions about how long it's going to take or how easy or hard it's going to be. It's going to be hard, it's going to take a long time. But that's what we have going. The U.S. campaign was doing divestment work in 2001, 4 years before the BDS call came from Palestinian civil society. This is something we're familiar with. The churches have been in the lead of it since the beginning. The students and the peace movement pales before the churches, I hate to say it. As one of the secular ones here, I always appreciate how Sabeel makes a point of engaging with not only the churches, but with the secular ones among us too. And on this one, I gotta say, you guys had us beat. You guys had us beat. The churches had us seculars beat. Stop laughing. Enough of that. But it's really true. And the question now becomes, what do we do with that? How do we engage directly with the United Nations? Rather than saying, we want our government to do X at the UN. And that means we follow the lead and the recommendations of the Goldstone Commission. We launch campaigns for accountability. To say that Israeli officials who come to this country should be arrested, not welcomed and given a hero's welcome with red carpets. And we have to have the legal backing, we have organizations, and we need evidence to back that up. That's going on all around the world. Is it going to happen right away? No, of course not. But is it something to build towards? Absolutely. Henry Kissinger today calls the State Department before he travels anywhere to find out if the country he wants to visit has a warrant for his arrest. That's huge. Now, is Henry Kissinger ever actually going to be arrested? Unfortunately, my guess is he's so old that he'll probably die before that ever happens. But the fact that he has to check, what a victory that is. What a victory for civil society mobilization.